What if I told you that what Adrian Newey discovered in Fernando Alonso's car in the second week of testing in Bahrain is not a secret improvement, but a problem that can compromise the entire season before it even starts? Because while other teams were simulating full races and fine-tuning fine details, Aston Martin could barely keep the car on the track. Constant stops, failed integration between the new Honda package, the gearbox and the rear suspension, and a final day reduced to just 6 laps. At the most important moment of preparation under a completely new regulation. And here's the shocking thing. What Newey has seen is not a lack of specific speed, it's something deeper. An aggressive concept, yes, but immature. A very narrow operating window. A car that is still not fully understood even by its own engineers. The big question is clear. Has the AMR26 been born with a structural problem that Aston Martin cannot quickly correct? The second week of testing in Bahrain should be the moment of confirmation for Aston Martin. The first round had left signs that the team was somewhat behind the initial plan, but there was still room to adjust, collect data and prepare the final leap towards the first race. However, what happened in this second phase completely changed the reading of the project. From the start, the AMR26 showed that it was not ready to run a clean program. Mileage was limited, interruptions began to accumulate and the car spent more time in the pit than on the track. In a normal preseason that would be worrying. But under a completely new regulation where every kilometer is pure gold to correlate wind tunnel, simulator and real behavior, it is directly critical. Fernando Alonso had a key program assigned to him. Long runs, evaluation of aerodynamic windows and simulations that would allow us to understand how the new technical package responds in real conditions. But that plan was interrupted by a power unit failure that stopped him after completing 68 laps. And the most important thing is not only that he stopped, but that he did not go out on the track again. That nipped in the bud the most valuable work of the test. While other teams were already working at race pace and exploring strategic limits, Aston Martin was trying to solve integration problems. The new Honda engine, gearbox and rear suspension assembly was not functioning as a perfectly synchronized unit. We are not talking about a lack of pure speed in a fast lap. We are talking about a car that still does not have basic operational stability. The last day was the confirmation of the problem. Just 6 laps completed before the team decided to stop the program. That decision is not trivial. It means that the risk of continuing to shoot outweighed the possible benefit of the data obtained. In other words, the team understood that the car was not yet in a condition to be demanded. This is where the analysis gets deeper. When you introduce a different cooling architecture, extremely aggressive rear packaging, and a complete redesign of key systems, you need everything to fit together. If the correlation is not perfect, the car can become unpredictable. It can work within a very specific window, but outside of it, it loses stability, consistency, and reliability. And that is what the team began to detect in this second week. It wasn't simply that performance was lacking. It was that the car was not yet fully understood. The mechanical and thermal integration was not fine-tuned. And without that solid foundation, any attempt to seek additional aerodynamic performance becomes a risk. The most delicate thing is the domino effect. With such low mileage, the information collected is not enough to validate models. If you can't fully trust the correlation, every future update becomes a gamble. And in a season where the margin between teams is minimal, betting without solid data can be very expensive. That's why what Newey sees in Bahrain is not simply a slow car. You see a project that needs to stabilize its foundation before thinking about exploiting its potential. He sees an ambitious concept that has not yet proven to be robust. And he sees, above all, that the time lost these days is not easily recovered. The second week in Bahrain left no certainties for Aston Martin. He left questions. Questions about reliability, about integration, on whether the AMR26 can extend its operating window enough to compete from the start. Because in Formula One, losing time in testing is not simply losing laps. It is losing understanding. And without understanding, there is no development. What the second week in Bahrain exposed is something that for an engineer like Adrian Newey is immediate. The car has an operating window that is too narrow. That means it works only under very specific conditions. Specific temperature, exact height, millimeter balance. As soon as you go slightly out of that range, performance drops or problems appear. And when a car is born like this, the problem is not setup. It's concept. The new Honda package, together with the gearbox and redesigned rear suspension, is not yet completely harmonized. Thermal integration, energy management, and mechanical stability do not seem to be 100% aligned. That generates two immediate consequences: vulnerable reliability and inconsistent data. And here comes the really delicate part. If the data you collect is not consistent because the car cannot complete long runs or because its behavior changes outside of a very specific window, the correlation with the wind tunnel and the simulator weakens. And when that happens, each future update stops being a controlled evolution and becomes a gamble. That's what Newey really sees in Bahrain, a project that needs to first stabilize its base before it can grow. While other teams were already refining performance details, Aston Martin was still trying to make the whole thing work solidly. And in a grid where the differences are minimal, starting the season with a structural delay is extremely dangerous. Because the calendar doesn't wait. The season starts, the Grands Prix come one after another, and if the car needs extra weeks to stabilize its internal integration, that means the first few races can become learning sessions rather than strengths opportunities. And here another critical element appears. When a car is conceptually aggressive, extreme rear packaging, distinct architecture, ambitious solutions usually offers high potential. But that potential is only unlocked when the foundation is robust. If the base is not, the team enters a cycle of constant corrections. Thermal adjustments, configuration changes, suspension modifications, aerodynamic compromises to protect reliability. Because after the second week in Bahrain, the situation is clear. The AMR26 does not arrive at the first race with a fully validated base. It comes with open questions. It arrives with incomplete integration. It arrives with limited data. And in Formula One, that is starting at a disadvantage. The most dangerous thing is not that the car has a specific performance deficit. The most dangerous thing is that the real scope of the problem is still not known precisely. When a team loses mileage in testing, it loses its ability to anticipate. And when you can't anticipate, you can only react. Adrian Newey fully understands what this means. A technically ambitious project needs structural stability to evolve. If this stability is not consolidated from the beginning, development becomes a constant corrective process. And each correction consumes resources, time and focus. Let's imagine the immediate scenario. First race. Conditions other than Bahrain. Different temperatures. Different asphalt. Real fuel loads. Complete career stress. If the car already showed a narrow operating window in testing, what happens when it enters a real weekend with park firm and minimal room for changes? That is where the solidity of a concept is tested. If the AMR26 needs to work within very specific parameters to function correctly, any deviation can expose weaknesses. And if those weaknesses reappear in the first races, the team will go into technical emergency mode. And here appears the greatest strategic risk. When you start the season trying to stabilize your car, you stop developing to gain performance. You start developing to survive. That means that while other teams introduce improvements to attack tenets, you are correcting fundamentals. The impact is cumulative. A complicated race is not a drama. 2 can be a sign. 3 are already setting trends. And that's what makes what was discovered in the second week of Bahrain truly shocking. It is not an isolated failure. It is the possibility that the concept needs deeper adjustments than anticipated. Newey doesn't need spectacular headlines to understand what he saw. He saw a car that is not yet ready to unleash its potential. He saw a project that needs to be consolidated before aspiring to compete at the top. He saw that the margin for reaction is limited when the season starts immediately after the tests. Now the mystery is clear. Can Aston Martin extend the AMR26 operating window quickly enough to avoid a compromised start? Or will Bahrain's second week be remembered as the first warning that the project needs more time than the calendar allows? Because in Formula One, the difference between a competitive year and a transition year is usually defined in moments like this. The second week of testing in Bahrain did not leave a clear picture of speed for Aston Martin. It left something more disturbing: structural doubts. It wasn't simply a stopwatch problem. It was not a poorly executed round. It wasn't a lost turn. It was a profound sign that the AMR26 is still not fully understood or stabilized in its most critical integration. Engine, gearbox, rear suspension and thermal architecture working as a single system. Adrian Newey did not discover a secret weapon hidden in Fernando Alonso's car. He discovered that the concept needs to be consolidated. Found that the operating window is too narrow. He discovered that the time lost on the track limits the ability for immediate development. And that, under a new regulation, is an enormous risk. Because Formula One does not wait. The calendar does not allow extra weeks to correct fundamentals. If the car needs stability over performance, the first few races can become diagnostic sessions rather than real attack opportunities. The big question is not whether the AMR26 has potential. The big question is whether Aston Martin will be able to unlock it in time. Bahrain, in its second week, did not confirm certainties. It set off an alert. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.